I think my heart and mind started to draw the conclusion that if she's not feeling as angry as I feel in this moment, how can we possibly respect each other?
Hey, it's Julie. Welcome to Uncomfy. A lot of us are struggling right now with how to stay open to other people when we seem to be living in different realities. I feel like I'm always walking on eggshells, but I don't want to give up on connection either. This is a podcast about staying with the moments we usually want to escape, the awkward ones, the tense ones, the ones that can actually teach us something. So let's get uncomfy.
A swirl of emotions, but the biggest emotion was sadness.
Friends, I want you to meet Marie Denman. She lives in a suburb of Minneapolis. And after Renee Good, the civilian, was shot and killed by an ICE agent, Marie had a text exchange with her mom that was uncomfy. And Marie has graciously agreed to talk us through how it went and how it's going now with her mom, because it's an experience that I think is so relatable on many levels. So Marie, I'm so grateful to have you with us. Thanks for joining me today.
Thanks so much, Julie. Really a pleasure.
Let's hear a little bit of the kind of basics. So your mom, she doesn't live in your same town, right? She's not in Minnesota?
No, she's in Ohio, which is my hometown as well.
You're in frequent text communication with her? Like, what was the nature of this particular text exchange that you had? And is this something you guys do a lot?
Yeah, we stay in pretty regular communication, probably daily text check-ins, as well as pretty regular FaceTimes between my mom and our two toddlers. And so the communication's pretty consistent, although this one was a little bit unique in that it was my mom sending me a text to check in on how we were in relationship to what was going on in Minneapolis and what she was, witnessing on the news.
So she sends you a text, hey, are you guys okay? Or was it like, how are you feeling about things?
It was, hey, just checking in on how you're doing with everything going on in Minnesota. Something to that extent. I experienced from it a real desire for her to check in on my sort of safety and well-being. And so I replied to her with, I sort of paused because we often view the political reality from different lenses and also digest news from different sources. And so I paused. And then I decided to be as authentic as possible in response. And so I texted back saying, we're safe, and I feel incredibly angry about what's going on and how the federal leadership is responding so quickly and seemingly without care for the tragedy that's occurred. Not verbatim, but that was the tone of it, and just feeling really angry, and expressing what I was feeling. And she replied in what I'm sure was her way of being kind. She replied saying, I'm so sorry you feel that way.
And how did that land? How did that land for you?
I felt angry and sad, right? So because it felt like, how could she not feel the same anger I was feeling? And I think my heart and mind started to draw the conclusion that if she's not feeling as angry as I feel in this moment, how can we possibly respect each other? Or maybe I don't know her as well as I thought I did, or maybe like there's something wrong here.
Yeah. This feels very, very relatable to me. The interactions that can go down with a close friend or with a family member, and all of a sudden you're like, hang on a second, like clearly you don't get, and now maybe like, what even is this that we have? So how did you respond?
So thanks to an incredible therapist, I've learned to identify when I'm starting to feel dysregulated. And I felt like I was in a pretty dysregulated in how I was feeling, while also feeling strongly that I was in the right, and a sense of righteous indignation. And so I just left it for a little bit. And then I decided, as I was sort of sitting on it, I realized if I let it sit without a conversation, that thread of conclusion that started to form when I felt angry, that I'm going to say this, but I don't mean it in full, but like, she must not be a good person. And it was just a thread of it. And I deeply know my mom is one of the best people that walks the earth. And so I decided to put my thoughts down in an email. First of all, setting the premise of, hey, I know you raised us to sort of deeply respect the dignity of each person. We always had a stranger in our home, whether those were, immigrants, whether those were folks without homes, whether they were priests or what have you. And my mom and dad, like, just uniquely had this capacity to love and open our home up to everyone regardless. And what I couldn't reconcile when I sat with it was, I know this is the person she is, with this woman who was killed, like, with such disregard in terms of the messaging that came out of the agent that shot her, like, with such disrespect, not even talking about the legality or the whatever, but just that the lack of dignity shown to her. And then the lack of,
because
yes,
there is tape of this individual as before he shoots saying FUB. And so it's kind of that piece that you're like, at the very least, Mom, can you agree that this part didn't
it's
feel right?
that part, and also how the federal administration responded, which what seemed to be such disregard for the value of her life and the value of her wife and what they were going through. They immediately responded saying she's a domestic terrorist. And it's such a callous disregard for even a pause. And so that to me is like, how are you? I think the conclusion I was drawing, how are you letting politics blind you to what feels like some really basic things we can agree on? And if we can't agree on these basics, like, what are we doing? Like, I know you're deeply good. I know you're deeply compassionate. Like, before I jump to the conclusion, before I let that thread get drawn, how do I really hold space for, there's a chance I might not see the full picture here?
That seems really important then, that you went into this email to her not looking to sort of convince her or chastise her, but to try to get to better understanding with the possibility that maybe you were missing something. That's also pretty uncomfy. And so
Yeah.
how did her response, I mean, did she write you back then?
Yeah. Well, and Julie, just before we pull on that, just one other thing on that. The other kind of uncomfy piece about that was, by having the conversation, I'm also putting at risk our relationship. Because if she verifies, there could be that you're just solidifying there really is this deep disconnect. And so I think part of, like, the uncomfy dynamic is there's risk in it, because you don't know the response. No matter how much you know someone, when you're prodding on things that are uncomfortable conversations, we resist the conversations because there's risk that they bring to light that we really are disconnected deeply.
Or that there's a lot of work that needs to be done to try to get
Or
to
that.
there. I can
Yes.
so relate to that. I'm like,
Yes.
oh gosh, things feel kind of okay right now in this relationship. I just don't know if I want to have to, potentially take it somewhere harder, but maybe more
Yes.
meaningful if I'm willing.
Yeah, exactly. And so then to answer your question, she responded in just the most beautiful way, which was, thank you so much for outlining this. It better helps me understand why you're angry. And it better, and she said, my reaction to the situation was because what it feels like for me, speaking in her words, from Ohio, watching the news, is that it just feels like a political tug of war of both, state and local leadership just saying we can do no wrong, and the federal government saying we can do no wrong, and everyone protecting their own nut, right? Like, and she said, so I sort of have felt like trying to just, I don't know if the not feel, or just sort of like, it just feels like a political battle.
Like
And
keep
so I'm
some
kind of
distance
staying out
from
of
it.
it.
Yeah,
Yep.
interesting.
Yeah.
Okay.
And then she replied saying, how you articulated helps me realize that we might not be so different.
Hmm.
And like, that was enough for me, right? Like, we didn't have any further conversations. The conversation naturally sort of ended in part because my dad, who has been sick for quite some time with stage 4 cancer, passed away. And I ended up going and staying with my parents along with the rest of my 6 siblings, all together for an extended period of time as we helped him move on to his next adventure. And so we just stayed in relationship together without a further conversation on this. And that was just a few weeks ago, and we haven't revisited it. And frankly, I'm not even sure if I feel the need to revisit it, because that exchange, even though it didn't dig into all of the nitty gritty of what happened, or like really work through all of it, it just sort of reconnected us, at least for me, in a way that I felt myself drawing back. And her response was enough to say, no, 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 like, this is the woman I remember, grew up with. And I maybe there's more conversations to be had, but it was enough to really set this closeness, which was really timely, because then we all, ended up in really close relationship, living in my parents' condo for a week together, in a way that was incredibly beautiful.
Well, I'm sorry to hear about your father's passing. And I'm so grateful that it worked out the way it did with your mom and that relationship. But I mean, have you thought about what might have been different if you hadn't braved that, sent that email, had that email exchange?
Yeah. um Sorry, it's a little fresh still.
Of course.
um I'm so grateful for it, because it really brought us closer, my mom and me. And there's a broader dynamic with my family, um, that sort of underlies the surface, in that I came out as gay, and there was a pretty deep resistance from my family in that, deeply Catholic, religious, sort of deeply conservative family of origin. And so there's been this sort of fundamental disconnects in terms of some basic life views, some pretty fundamental life views that we've been navigating over the years. And there's not like kumbaya, we all feel the same way. But we remain in very close relationship, which is feels like an impossibility, but we've been able to navigate that, in a very bumpy way at many moments. But what this exchange allowed for was that when I went home to be with my family before my dad passed, it allowed me to have a softness, a gentleness, that I think if we hadn't had that exchange, I would have, I think, had a more of a wall up.
Is there something that your parents did, or taught you and your siblings that you think has enabled? Because the way that you've described how this has played out is in some ways the best of worlds, right? The ability, so many families feel so torn by these fundamental differences, and things could have gone so differently in your family. What do you think? What has had to be in place for you to stay connected as a family through those things?
Yeah. So first of all, in full disclosure, it's been fits and starts. There were many years where I wasn't home, either because I wasn't welcomed home or I didn't want to be home. Many years where my wife wasn't welcome, or right, or that I didn't feel comfortable. So first of all, I want to acknowledge that where we're at today, there's a whole history of imperfection on their side as well as my side in terms of navigating this, and different levels of capacity at different moments of time to engage. But going back to your question with what my parents did, I think they both were just deeply, deeply genuine humans. So although they had some pretty extreme beliefs in terms of how we were raised without TV, we were raised without any sort of, wore dresses, long hair, right, the whole 9 yards, in a way that was, looking back, quite extreme. throughout it, I deeply believe that they were doing out of a genuine love for me and a desire to do the right thing. And their conclusion was that if you follow the Catholic teachings, that will make you happy and you'll go to heaven. And so that was sort of the guiding light. And even though I disagree with that conclusion, I deeply believe that they really thought that was the case, or really do think that's the case. And so they were reacting over the years, and even how they view things politically or how they view things from a social issues perspective. It's relating to me because they care about me. So I think, Julie, that, like, as I've thought about that, especially in the wake of my dad's death, like that deep care, I feel it to my bones, even in the midst of, moments of deep pain.
I'm so appreciative of you sharing such a personal experience. And I feel like I've learned so much in hearing you kind of think through and talk through what you've grappled with in relationship with your family. And I guess I just wonder why, so for folks who are watching or listening, like, we don't know one another, but have a common associate who is a friend of yours who was like, hey, you really should talk to Anne Marie for Uncomfy. And I'm like, great, I would love to. And I guess I wonder, like, it didn't take a ton of arm twisting, even though this is a very personal story. Why did you want to talk about it?
Great question. I've asked that myself. We're in an environment right now where it feels like I look at friends on different sides of the political, ideological spectrum, and I just see so many people deeply believe that the other side is bad or ill intentioned or not smart. And I think I've been given a gift. It's come on the back of a lot of pain and heartache, but a gift in having a family of origin that I know they're good, and they're some of the smartest people I know, and they're so well intentioned. And also having a lived experience and an evolution of my own thought process around political and social thoughts, that I know that it's not all the people here are good intentioned and smart, and all the people here are stupid and selfish and being tricked by whomever or manipulated. And I feel like that window that I've been required or that space I've been required to sit in and decided to sit in, has given me a bridging lens. And I just feel a deep need and desire to do whatever I can. And if that means splaying myself on the altar of bridging, if it even just creates the question of doubt that the other side might not be wholly wrong or wholly awful, then maybe it helps us all start pausing and maybe hold space of holding off drawing absolute conclusions, that maybe there are people out there that are not so different from us.
Anne Marie, thank you so much.
Thanks for having me on, and really appreciate the discussion.
And thank you for getting uncomfy with us today. I'm so grateful to Anne Marie for sharing her story. It's given me some things to think about in my own relationships. I'd love to hear what it sparked for you. You can email uncomfy@byu.edu or reach out on social media to keep the conversation going. We are at uncomfy.podcast on Instagram. Uncomfy is a BYU Radio podcast. Samuel Benson produces it. The team includes Hyobin Kim and Sam Payne. Our theme music was composed by Kelsey Ney. I'm Julie Rose. Can't wait to get uncomfy with you again next week. Julie here. Just one more thing before you go. If you're a mom, or if you know a mom that could use a little backup, there's a new podcast from BYU Radio you'll want to hear about. It's called The Council of Moms, and it's all about the real, messy, beautiful moments of motherhood, from picky eaters and bedtime battles to the deeper stuff like anxiety and raising resilient kids. The show is honest, funny, full of heart. These are moms who get it, and they're showing up to support each other and support you. So if you're feeling a little overbooked and underappreciated, this might be just the boost you need. You can find Council of Moms on Apple Podcasts, Spotify, YouTube, or anywhere you listen.